Hi and welcome to CG Jam. In this little mini series we're going to be looking at character modelling. In this episode I'm going to be introducing you to the sculpting tools, and this will just be a basic introduction where we will show you some of the brushes and we will have a look at a few of the settings, and we'll start doing a little bit of sculpting on this model that I have here. And then in our next video we will look at retopologizing the model that we've created in this video. And then in our final video of this little series we will take a look at the other sculpting methods and add in the fine detail and finish off the model. And then we'll bake it all out into normal maps to preserve that detail on the low poly model, and then we'll get into rigging it and we'll see if we can do something a little bit special with the finished product. Okay, so this thing that I'm poking around with is a low poly base mesh, which I'm going to use to begin the sculpting process. If we just take a look at it, you can see it is simply a humanoid shape, kind of standard male personage. It's not the best model I've ever done, but it's good enough for sculpting, at least for dynamic topology sculpting, which is what we're going to go into. As you can see, if we just click on our modifiers, we just have a simple mirror modifier, just so that it makes it easier to model. And we're going to do a bit of tweaking to this mesh. I want to make it look a bit more like a fantasy creature rather than a human person. So I'm going to select this side and pull it out a little bit. So to do that, I'll just press this little button down here, limit selection to visible, and now we can see the back of the mesh. And I'll press C to get my circle select up, and I'll just paint over the mesh, and that selects everything that I need. I'll just go to about there, take a little bit of its ribs, and if I just pull it out gently and give him a broader chest, yeah, that'll do. It's a bit excessive, but that's all part of the fun. I'll scale it up a little bit, make him a bit bulky. Yep, that seems about right. Yeah, that'll do. Let's have a look at the front now. That is absolutely ridiculous and perfect for what we want. So now I'll just come in and do his legs. If I press Alt and Shift Select, having trouble there. So, oh no, I've done it again. Let's turn off the limit selection and Alt click and select. Alt click and select. I'm just going around selecting what I need, and then I'll scale it up by pressing S and giving him some chunky thighs. Yeah, they look good. What else can we do? Yeah, I'm just going to pull out his front a little bit. Give him a bit of frontage, a bit of a belly. And the reason I'm doing this is because the more geometry we have to work with, I'm just going in the back of the neck now, the more geometry we have to work with, the easier it is to sculpt. But obviously we don't need too much geometry because we're going to be creating that in the dynamic topology sculpt itself. But if we have a basic shape to work with, we don't run into as many problems. I'm just going to do his head a little bit. I think if we have him jutting forward, just pull it forward a little bit. I'm losing a bit. I'm using my proportional editing tool, which is just this little circle down here. Let's turn it off now and just grab it as it is. Quite fiddly, but trying to move the whole head in sculpt mode and things would be an absolute nightmare. I did try this model earlier, just sculpting it from a basic cube. It was a disaster. You're not going to see the video of that. Okay, I'm gonna just tidy up the mesh where we pulled it out. I'll just pull down these corners. Take those out. Yeah. It's all just poking around, fiddling, just making it look similar. Oh dear, I've trapped my center vertices because my mirror has clipping applied to it. And that clipping fuses the center vertex with the mirrored part, but it does kind of it gets these other vertices, if they get into the center as well, it will snap them, so you can end up having all your vertices piled on top of each other, which is not what you need. I'm just going to go down and separate them. Like so, if I can grab it. Yeah, that's it. Just check I haven't connected his thighs together when I scaled them up. Bring that down a bit. Looks a bit silly where it was. Although having said that, the whole thing looks a bit silly. I was rounding off the backs of his thighs. Pull his cheeks down a bit. And remember, we're not aiming for detail here. All we're aiming for is shape. And the better the shape, the easier the sculpt. It's all very dull just watching me poke vertices around. I forgot to turn the clipping on. There we go. Yeah, so I'm going to get in now. I'm going to call that pretty much done. All the rest of the detailing we can get in the sculpting. I'll just tidy this neck up a bit, because that's, if it's deep in the mesh like that, pulling it out again and getting it nice will be horrendous. Of course, there are limitations to sculpting. Dynamic topology obviously you can get creases and things in the mesh which you don't want, and if things are too close together or too inset, it can be a problem, which is why we're going around and just fixing things up. Just fix the back of his head and then we'll get into it. Okay, I'll hold it there and we can go and deal with things. Okay, so I jump into object mode and apply my mirror modifier, and we can go straight into sculpt mode. And immediately the first thing you see is we now have our brush selection icon in our toolbox. So if I click that, you can see all the different brushes we have. A blob brush and many brushes, many brushes. And the first main brushes are your drawing brushes. This brush just creates a line. This adds chunks of clay to your mesh. This one adds strips of clay. This one pulls all the vertices together and makes creases. This one deepens ridges that you have, or it can fill them up where you draw. And this one flattens, and it's all very self-explanatory really. Grabs, allows you to move the mesh around. I'm not really going to explain everything that these do. I'll just this mask node at the bottom, this mask brush rather. This allows you to draw on the mesh and essentially stops the clay from building up wherever you've painted. The snake hook works similar to the grab in that you grab an area of mesh and pull things out. We'll just have a quick look at that. If I zoom in, press shift to rotate, shift should pan, there we go. For some reason it was a bit tricky. Okay, if I use my square bracket key and just increase the size of the brush and select a piece of the mesh using the snake hook, you can see it just drags out a lump of mesh, and that's handy. You can use it for pulling limbs and things, but when you're using the dynamic topology tends to stretch, get stretching and creasing happening, and sometimes you get, well, a lot of the time you get just single planes sticking out of the mesh that you can't really sculpt on. It's all horrible and awkward, which is why I've prepared the mesh in advance. So I'll go back to the brush tool, and if we take a look at the settings, the first thing we see is the radius, and that relates to the size of the brush in the viewport. As you can see, it's quite large. If I lower it down, it becomes quite small. So if I zoom in, you'll notice that the size of the brush remains constant, and I can draw in detail as I get closer. I can't do much on this mesh because we haven't enabled the dynamic topology and there isn't much to work with, but if I zoom out again, you can see that now the brush is larger relative to the mesh. But if I press this lock icon and I zoom out, you see that aside from having a big yellow circle over everything, you'll see that the size of the brush is now remaining at a constant size. So you can zoom out and look at the overall effect of the mesh and sculpt on it, and you maintain the size that you want. So that's the radius. And this little finger at the end icon, this is our pressure sensitivity button. If you were to use a graphics tablet, you click that and you'll be able to adjust the radius by pressing on the tablet. And the strength value simply influences how much of the mesh is distorted. The higher the strength, the more clear you get on your model. This auto smooth just smooths out the edges as you paint automatically. Area plane is the area that you're affecting when you paint. If we take a look at the Z plane, for example, as I paint over, you'll see that the mesh only moves in the Z direction. And if I press the X, it just drags it along the X direction. I'll set it back to its area plane and undo that. Front faces just allows you to paint on what's directly in front of you. The add and subtract menu buttons, simply if I press add, it should grow the mesh, and if I press subtract, it should take away, and it's all going wrong. So for some reason, so if I just undo that quickly and try now, it's adding it when it should be subtracting, and the reason for that is probably because the normals are a bit messy. So I'm going to go out of sculpt mode and into edit mode, and if I select everything by pressing A and then pressing A again, and if I scroll down and select the normals and choose recalculate, that'll just fix all the normals to be facing the outside where they should be, and Blender will now know what it's supposed to be doing. So if I go back to sculpt mode, take a look here, and if I start subtracting, there we go, it's taking away that mesh. If I click add, it adds mesh to the model. Excellent. That's what we want. That's what that does. I'll just undo those. We don't need them for now. Accumulate allows you to build up strokes on top of each other. So if I go backwards and forwards, you'll see how it's building up there. Just undo that. We don't need it. And the alpha overlay just allows you to see the brush in the viewport, which is handy if you've got textures and you want to see where you're applying them on your mesh. In this case it's not particularly useful because we're just using circles as brushes, so we'll turn that off and we'll move down to the next section that we need to look at. We'll look at these top few in the high-res sculpt, and for now we'll just go to Topology and enable Dynamic, and that's immediately, you can see it's split our model into triangulated faces. If I go into edit mode, I can just show you there. You'll see each face has been split into a triangle, and Dynamic Topology uses triangles to create its sculpting. As you draw over the mesh, it splits each of those triangles into smaller triangles. If I pop back into sculpt mode, I have to enable dynamic again, because when you leave sculpt mode it turns it off. So I'll just turn it back on and scroll down and we'll have a look at these. This detail size relates to the size of the brush in pixels, which we'll see more clearly when we get into sculpting. Now this smooth shading, if I just click that, it just shades the model smooth. It's slightly different to the smooth shading in edit mode. You have to enable it here, otherwise it doesn't work properly. The collapse short edges relates to the size of the detail. Anything shorter than the detail size, when you brush over with collapse short edges selected, just breaks down the edge size to the size of the detail size. Symmetrize, if I paint on the mesh and there's no mirroring on the mesh, then I get these lumps. If I just paint quickly, you'll see the sculpt isn't mirrored over to the other side. And what the Symmetrize option does, it allows me to translate a sculpt of the mesh onto the mirror, and I can choose which mirroring direction to sculpt to Symmetrize to. And if I press the button, you can see that it's copied that sculpt that I did on the right hand side over onto the left. If I just undo that quickly, and the final option we need to look at is the Symmetry. If I just open that, you'll see it's got the mirror options, and I can check the X mirror. Now when I sculpt over it, you can see it mirrors on the opposite side. Okay, and that's essentially all we need to look at for the dynamic topology sculpting. We'll take a look at the other options, the texture, stroke, curve, when we come to the high-res sculpt. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just go in and I'm going to spend 5 or 10 minutes just sculpting, and I'll give you an idea of just what exactly we're doing here. So the first thing, I'm just looking at my mesh. I've got my standard brush selected. I'm going to go in, sculpt over. I think if I start on the chest, I can get that form defined. I'm just holding down my left mouse button and just drawing over, getting the basic shape, what I want. It's nice and easy, and you can see the dynamic topology is breaking up the mesh, adding extra triangles where it's needed. Excuse me. But you'll also notice that it's keeping the original form, but if I come in, oops, I've picked the wrong brush. If I come in with the smooth brush and I just run it over that sculpt, you'll see it eases up those sharp edges, and we're getting a reasonable pectoral area. Come back in with my what brush do I want? I'm going to go for clay strips, and this is just going to add clay wherever I paint. If I just draw it in, I'm just building up the shoulders and the muscles that connect to the neck. Work on these shoulders for a bit, just add some clay around the front of the neck. Do a little bit more on the chest. just ever so gently. And just looking in edit mode, you can see exactly what's going on. Where I've sculpted on the mesh, it's broken down those planes into smaller triangulated areas, and we're getting a really quite dense mesh now. But that's nothing compared to what we're going to get into. Just remember to turn it on again because we came out of sculpt mode. I'll go back with my clay strips now and start painting in some more of the form. And remember, this is only about form, we're not going to go for details here. Once I've finished this model, which I'm not going to go through the whole process because that would be a long and quite tedious event for you to watch, I'm just going to paint into the form itself. And then in our next video we'll look at the retopology, that is recreating a decent base mesh based on the shape of this model that we can then go into and do a high level sculpt on, bake out some normal maps and apply those normal maps to the low level base mesh, and that will give the illusion of the detail that we had in the sculpt. But what it'll really do is it'll give us a mesh that we can use for animating that's not too heavy with polygons and vertices and things, and it won't be so memory intensive trying to move it, because even now if I was to try and move the mesh it would take Blender forever to calculate the movement of all the normals and all the vertices and things. I'm just going back in with my brush tool, building up the shoulders and the back of the neck. And you can see on the back of the neck where it's kind of creasing, and if you remember when we modelled the mesh earlier in the video, we had those really deep grooves that we pulled out. Now if we'd left those in when we tried to sculpt them out, we would have had all that creasing would have been intensified, and we would probably have ended up tearing our mesh and just making it horrible. I'm just going to work on the skull for a bit, see if we can get a reasonable shape for our model. You can see I'm going for quite a muscly creature, a humanoid thing. It won't be entirely human when it's done. At least I hope not, it's not supposed to be. It'll be some kind of trollish thing, a forest troll, I think. Yeah, that sounds good. You'll notice also I don't have any references, I don't have anything on my other screen, I'm just going from what feels good at the moment. Usually it's quite practical to have some sort of concept art to refer to, either a digital painting or a hand-drawn painting that either yourself or someone or a client or whoever has done for you, and you can just normally refer to that. I'm not using one in this, I'm just kind of doing it on the fly. I kind of enjoy that, just creating things from nothing. I'm just building up some detail. These are supposed to be the neck tendons, and I've overdone them a bit, but that's okay, I'll smooth it out, bring it down a bit. And you'll find yourself doing a lot of sculpting, then smoothing, and then sculpting again, smoothing out again. That's just the way it goes. It helps you to build up the form. Do some cheeks on the face. But even if you've got some kind of weird fantasy creature, what am I doing with these face muscles? Never mind, I'll fix them in a minute. Even when you've got a fantasy creature, it's a good idea to work with sort of existing anatomy, at least, so that it's, if a creature's totally unrecognizable for what it's supposed to be, then it's kind of a fail, really. You want people to look at it and think, ooh, creepy, not what the hell is that? So yeah, taking existing features and exaggerating them is a lot better than trying to recreate something that doesn't exist, unless you're going for something totally alien and you want to freak people out and make people say, what is that? But you don't want them to be laughing at your model, you want them to be shocked and surprised. So even something really freaky should have some recognizable features, like if it's walking, it should have legs of some description, whether they're weird tentacly legs or spidery legs. Well, you kind of get what I mean, I think. I'm just working on his nose now. I'll make it bulgy. I don't want a pointy nose. This is a troll after all, so we'll give it a big bulbous nose. Just take these edges down again, round it off. Just round it off nicely. Yeah, that's good. I'll add the nostrils in a moment. I'm just going to go in and smooth it out. And the whole reason behind this model is because I'm going to be doing a rigging video. I'm going to do a bit of a special rig, hopefully. I still need to do a little bit of research on how to do it, but I've got a pretty good idea, and what it's going to be about is muscle deformations. But we're going to try and avoid using shape keys. We're going to do something a little bit different. I hope it'll be interesting. I hope it works more than anything. Just put the lips in here. Yeah, it's going to be interesting if nothing else. I'll smooth those out, and then once I've done, if that all works out, I think, yeah, let's do an animation. I've got a couple of ideas already for animating. Do a nice little movie, and we'll do a few tutorials on that, so you can get in and do something a bit better than the beginner series animation. We'll get more into detail of how all that works. I think that will be a good idea. Be fun anyway. And of course, I won't be putting this model for you to download anywhere because it's just a base mesh, but the final, or at least the retopologized mesh, will be available on BlendSwap once it's finished, so you can download that and play with it. And you'll obviously need it for the rigging tutorial, or you can use your own characters. You don't need to do mine, you can just do whatever you want. Take this little lesson and come up with something fantastic. And I hope you do. It'd be awesome to see some of your own creations. I'm just putting the join now. Yeah, I like to see other people's work when they've put a lot of effort in and taken what they've learnt and applied it to their own things. I mean, that's what these tutorials are all about. I don't intend for you to copy me exactly. That would be quite boring if the whole internet was full of the same. And it's good seeing people learn, but when every post you see online is recognizable and you can see, oh, that's from that tutorial, or oh, that's from that tutorial, or tutorials should be about learning and taking the lessons and interpreting them your own way. Do something exciting with it. That's what I'd like to see. So yeah. Okay, well, this video's dragging on to about half an hour now, so I'm going to smooth this off here, get the jawbone looking good. I'm going to stop the video now, and I'll come back once I've finished the sculpting. It's going to take me a few hours, and then I'll let you have a look at that, and then we can think about moving on to the next video. Okay, see you in a moment. Alright, we're back again, and we have the dopiest looking beast you've ever seen. It's, yeah, okay. I've just got a few final touches to do. It's not bad. I'll just fix this bit of the shoulder where I messed up. I tried to extend the arms, and that didn't work out too well. I used the grab tool, and it seems to have squashed everything. As you can see, it's not brilliant. It all went horribly wrong, and the hands, the base mesh wasn't suitable for doing the hands, and they all went horribly wrong as well. But it's not an entirely huge disaster. I can easily fix that up. We'll go into the dynamic. We'll go into edit mode and we'll retopologize it, and we'll do the fixings on the final base mesh. The legs are a bit stumpy on the shins, but it gives the overall idea of what we're trying to achieve. You can see the hands are, oops, don't want to do that. You can see the hands are completely abysmal. I'm actually more used to polymodelling than I am sculpting. As you can probably tell, my sculpting's not brilliant. But it's a good model, and it's trollish enough for me, and it's got enough muscle definition for me to do what I want with the rigging. And I've done his eyes in a weird, big, open kind of way. I didn't want the normal human-sized eyes. If I look at it under smooth shading, I'll just click the button and wait for an edge. You can see it doesn't look too bad, really. I mean, it looks like what we want. I'll make him a little bit fatter. I'll lose some of that rib cage because that looks ridiculous. You can see the arms here are just abysmal. And I've done his ears just to sculpt on the side of his head. I don't actually like them. I'm going to redo those slightly differently when I do the retopology. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's what we've got, that's what we're going with, and it'll look a hell of a lot better when I finish the next video. Look at those fingers. This is the problem with with sculpting in general. If you don't have the geometry there, it can collapse in on itself and you just end up with unsculptable planes. And because I didn't really pay any attention to modelling the hands when I did the base mesh, you get this, so I didn't really bother sculpting much there. Okay, that's about it. It looks good enough for me. I'm happy with it to a degree. I'm happy that I can fix it easily enough anyway. So I'll leave it there, and we'll see you in the next video when we get onto the topology sculpting. Not sculpting. We're not sculpting in the next video. Mesh modelling in edit mode. So until then, please feel free to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode, and we will see you on, well, post us what you do on Facebook and Twitter and things, you know, all that good stuff that everybody is doing nowadays. Just ease that off a bit, that's a bit too severe. That looks better. Yeah. Okay, never mind. Right, I'm going. I'll see you all. You can tweak these things forever. Just go on tweaking and adding bits and making it look better. I'm going to stop now. I'm going to stop. Right, I'm gone. Cheers, I'll see you in the next video. Yeah, and don't forget to share and subscribe and do all the likes and things. Yeah, show it to your mates. Right, I'm really going this time. Bye.